welcome to tonight's journey into Silent Hill. Let me know down in the comments where you're tuning in from, and if you're into these long, late night lore dives, subscribing is the easiest way to keep up. Silent Hill is not only a town haunted by monsters and fog, but also by belief. At the center of its mythology lies the Order, a cult that promises paradise but thrives on deception and suffering. They are more than simple villains in a horror story. Their rituals, symbols, and language echo real-world traditions, drawn from religious mysticism, occult practices, and even the structure of historical cults. In the first game, Harry Mason is lured into their orbit by Dahlia Gillespie, a woman who wears the costume of a Christian devotee, greeting him inside a church that looks safe and familiar. But this is a mask. Her words borrow from occult practices like gyromancy, a form of divination forbidden in Christianity, even as she pretends to be a pious guardian of faith. This contradiction is not an accident, it's the cult's method. They use familiar symbols to build trust, and then twist them into tools of control. Silent Hill borrows heavily from real mystical names and legends. Samael, called in ancient texts the Angel of Death; Metatron, the exalted angel who stands beside God's throne; Floros, a demon from medieval grimoires said to command legions. In the games, these names are reimagined, stripped from their roots and reshaped into the cult's dark theology. What results is a religion that feels disturbingly authentic, not because it is true, but because it is built from fragments of real belief, stitched into something monstrous. To uncover the dark secrets of the Silent Hill cult, we must look at how it blends real-world faith with twisted invention. The Order thrives on contradiction, weaving together echoes of Christian ritual, occult prophecy, and the desperate hunger for paradise. And in their lies, they reveal a truth. Sometimes, the most frightening monsters in Silent Hill are not the ones in the fog, but the ones standing at the altar. Salvation through suffering. At the heart of the Order's doctrine is the conviction that paradise can only be birthed through agony. Their God, they claim, will not arrive through joy or peace, but through torment. This is most clearly shown in the story of Alessa Gillespie in the first Silent Hill. Chosen by her mother Dahlia, Alessa was subjected to a ritual that left her body burned and broken, yet unnaturally sustained by the town's power. Her endless pain created the nightmare world that players wander through, a manifestation of both her trauma and the cult's perverse theology. For the Order, Alessa's suffering was not tragedy, it was necessity. They saw her torment as sacred, believing that the screams of a child could be transformed into the cries of a newborn God. This chilling inversion of faith reveals the cult's true nature, a religion that sanctifies abuse, dressing cruelty in the language of salvation. Real-world cults have often demanded similar sacrifices, pushing followers to endure starvation, punishment, or humiliation as proof of devotion. Silent Hill's cult draws from this reality, showing how belief can be weaponized to justify torment in the name of paradise. The chosen vessel, the Order's pursuit of their God requires more than ritual, it requires a body. Central to their beliefs is the idea of a vessel, a chosen human who can carry divinity into the world. In Silent Hill 3, this role falls upon Heather Mason, who is both her own person and the reincarnation of Alessa Gillespie. Heather is hunted not because of anything she chose, but because her very existence has been shaped by the cult's earlier schemes. Claudia Wolf, the cult leader in this game, insists that Heather's pregnancy with their God is not a crime, but destiny. The concept of a vessel strips the individual of autonomy. Heather is reduced to a womb for the cult's deity. her life and choices irrelevant compared to the supposed salvation she carries. This echoes disturbing real-world parallels, where women in extremist religious sects or cults are seen as instruments of reproduction, their worth defined solely by their ability to produce the next generation or embody prophecy. In Silent Hill, this is taken to its darkest extreme. Motherhood is exalted not as creation, but as sacrifice. Heather's resistance against this fate, her refusal to surrender to Claudia's plan, becomes one of the series' most powerful conflicts. It transforms the cult's theology into something personal, not only for Heather but for players who witness the horror of a belief system that erases individuality in pursuit of a distorted paradise. Twisting familiar symbols, the Order's theology does not stand apart from the world, it hides within it. Their churches resemble Christian sanctuaries, complete with altars and pews, creating the illusion of safety. But within those walls, prayers are not offered to Christ. Instead, they are directed toward a deity born of fire and blood. This deceptive use of architecture is intentional. By cloaking their rituals in familiar shapes, the cult disarms outsiders and makes their faith appear legitimate. Symbols deepen the illusion. The halo of the sun, a circular crest of triangles and eyes, is displayed like a sacred emblem, evoking the authority of a holy seal. The so-called Mark of Samael, revealed in Silent Hill 1, is in truth the seal of Metatron, an icon twisted by Dahlia to frighten and manipulate. Even the name Samael is borrowed from ancient texts, where it is sometimes described as the angel of death. By repurposing such names and symbols, the Order gives weight to their lies. They do not invent their power from nothing. They stitch it together from fragments of existing religions and occult lore. This practice mirrors real-world cult behavior. Throughout history, groups seeking authority have borrowed the imagery of established faiths, crosses, chants, even scripture, while altering their meanings to suit new agendas. The Order thrives on this same misdirection. To the unknowing, their symbols suggest legitimacy. To the initiated, they mark faith built on distortion, where the familiar becomes frightening and every holy emblem hides a darker truth. The cult and the illusion of sanctuary. One of Silent Hill's most unsettling techniques is how the Order disguises horror in the trappings of safety. When Harry Mason first encounters Dahlia in Silent Hill 1, it is inside a church that looks no different from countless small-town chapels. Wooden pews line the aisle, candles flicker at the altar, and crosses hang on the walls. To a weary traveler, it feels like a place of refuge. But this sanctuary is an illusion. The prayers spoken here are to a God born of blood and fire, and the guidance offered is designed to entrap. This contrast, holy architecture masking unholy rites, is central to the cult's power. By blending the familiar with the profane, the Order draws in victims who let their guard down in spaces that should protect them. Players experience this same dissonance firsthand, stepping into what should be a sanctuary, only to discover it is a theater for manipulation. The effect is disorienting, reinforcing the theme that nothing in Silent Hill can be trusted, not even places that feel sacred. The illusion of sanctuary extends beyond architecture. The Order cloaks itself in the language of salvation, promising paradise through devotion, even as its rituals strip away freedom and life. This echoes real-world cult dynamics, where leaders present themselves as shepherds, claiming to offer protection from the chaos of the world. In truth, the safe haven they provide becomes the very prison that traps their followers. Silent Hill makes this metaphor literal. Churches become sites of betrayal. Priests become executioners. And the promise of salvation leads only deeper into nightmare. The Mask of Piety. When Harry Mason first meets Dahlia Gillespie in Silent Hill, she is framed by the architecture of a church. The pews, the crucifixes, and the soft lighting suggest a sanctuary, a place where a desperate father might find guidance. Dahlia herself plays the part of a pious woman, composed, maternal, and steeped in the language of prophecy. She tells Harry that his arrival was foretold, wrapping her words in the tone of a devout believer. But this appearance is a calculated mask. Beneath the trappings of Christian imagery lies an occultist, one who has burned her own daughter alive in pursuit of her cult's god. The church setting is a stage, and Dahlia uses it to manipulate Harry into trusting her. By invoking prophecy and playing the role of a spiritual authority, she ensnares him in her schemes. This kind of deception is not unique to Silent Hill. Throughout history, cult leaders have borrowed the language of faith to lure in followers, building trust by mimicking the outward forms of religion even as they twist its meaning. Dahlia embodies this duality perfectly, the trusted guide who is, in truth, the architect of horror. The Lie of Samael. One of Dahlia Gillespie's most effective manipulations is her invention of the so-called Mark of Samael. Throughout the first game, Harry encounters strange circular sigils painted onto walls, floors, and courtyards. Dahlia tells him these marks belong to Samael, a powerful demon she claims is being summoned, and she warns that their spread across the town will bring ruin if he does not stop them. To Harry, already disoriented by the nightmare world, the explanation seems plausible. But Dahlia is lying. The symbol is not the mark of Samael at all. It is the seal of Metatron, a protective emblem with the potential to undo her own schemes. By disguising the seal as a threat rather than a safeguard, she manipulates Harry into serving her ends, driving him to oppose what might actually help him. This inversion is one of the cult's darkest secrets. Truth is turned into falsehood, and salvation into damnation. Her choice of the name Samael is telling. In real mystical texts, Samael is often called the angel of death, sometimes equated with the serpent of Eden. By invoking this name, Dahlia draws on centuries of fear tied to religious tradition, giving weight to her lie. It is a classic tactic of cult leaders. Take a fragment of real belief, twist it, and wield it as a weapon of control. In Silent Hill, the deception works. Harry, and by extension the player, is made complicit in Dahlia's plot through the power of a single, calculated falsehood, prophecy, and gyromancy. Dahlia's manipulation of Harry Mason goes beyond lies about symbols. She also invokes prophecy to make her schemes sound inevitable. Early in Silent Hill, she tells Harry that his arrival was foretold, citing a practice called gyromancy, a form of divination that involves spinning until collapse, using the direction of the fall as an oracle. In Christian tradition, such practices are condemned as idolatry and forbidden, but Dahlia invokes it while standing inside a church, as if it were perfectly natural. The contradiction should have been obvious, yet Harry is too desperate and disoriented to notice. By cloaking her intentions in the language of prophecy, Dahlia convinces Harry that he is a chosen figure, fated to play a role in events beyond his understanding. This is not guidance, it is manipulation. Real-world cults often use prophecy the same way, convincing followers that their hardships or sacrifices are part of a divine plan that has already been written. By doing so, leaders strip away free will and replace it with obligation, making dissent feel like a betrayal of destiny itself. In Silent Hill, Dahlia's prophecy is both absurd and terrifying. On the surface, gyromancy seems like little more than spinning in circles until one falls, almost laughable in its simplicity. But framed within the nightmare of the town, it becomes a tool of control, binding Harry to a story that Dahlia alone claims to understand. Her words are a cage, and prophecy is the lock that keeps him inside. Flauros, the cage of peace. Among the cult's many tools, few are as mysterious or as central as the Flauros. In Silent Hill 1, Dahlia gives Harry this strange, pyramid-shaped object, presenting it as a necessary device to stop the spread of evil. In reality, it is a trap, a binding device capable of suppressing or controlling supernatural forces. When Harry uses it, the Flauros temporarily restrains Alessa, locking her power in place so Dahlia can further her plan. What is presented as salvation becomes a weapon against the innocent. The name Flauros is not invented by the game. It comes from the Lesser Key of Solomon, a medieval grimoire describing demons and how to command them. In those texts, Flauros is a spirit who appears in the form of a leopard or fiery man, able to reveal truths and command other demons. By naming the device after this figure, Silent Hill roots its fiction in real, occult traditions, adding a layer of unsettling authenticity. The Flauros is emblematic of the Order's philosophy. Faith and tools are not meant to heal or protect, but to bind, restrain, and control. Just as Dahlia manipulates Harry with false prophecy, she manipulates him into using the Flauros against his own daughter. It is a chilling reminder that in Silent Hill, even sacred-seeming relics are turned into instruments of exploitation. Aglaophotis, the red substance. Another of the cult's most intriguing tools is Aglaophotis, a mysterious red liquid or herb that appears in multiple games. In Silent Hill, Kaufman uses a vial of this substance to force the parasitic god embryo out of Alessa. In Silent Hill 3, Heather can also use it to expel the god growing within her, an act that subverts the cult's entire plan. Unlike the Flauros, which binds, Aglaophotis purges. It cleanses the body of demonic or supernatural influence. The name Aglaophotis has roots in real-world mysticism. It appears in ancient magical texts associated with plants used to ward off evil spirits or counteract curses. By bringing this into Silent Hill, the developers give the Order's practices a strange credibility, as though their rites draw from a deeper, older tradition of occult medicine. This makes the cult feel less like pure invention and more like a distorted survival of forbidden knowledge. But in the hands of the Order, even Aglaophotis is twisted. Though it has the power to protect, they view it not as a gift but as a dangerous tool that can undo their designs. The fact that a single vial could destroy their god exposes the fragility of their faith. In a religion that thrives on control and submission, Aglaophotis represents rebellion, the possibility that the cycle of suffering can be broken. That fear is why the Order keeps it hidden, treating salvation itself as contraband. The halo of the sun, perhaps the most recognizable emblem of the Order, is the halo of the sun, a circular sigil composed of interlocking triangles and watchful eyes. In Silent Hill 3, it appears repeatedly in sacred spaces and cult materials, functioning as both a symbol of identity and a magical seal. Claudia Wolfe speaks of it with reverence, presenting it as a mark of divine authority. For followers of the Order, the halo is proof of legitimacy, an image that binds their faith together. The design draws on patterns seen in real-world religious iconography. The concentric circles echo mandalas, used in Eastern traditions as representations of the universe and pathways to enlightenment. The The triangles evoke associations with the Christian Trinity, while the eyes recall ancient symbols of vigilance and divine watchfulness. None of these references are copied directly. Instead, they are combined into something new. This blending of imagery mirrors how many cults construct their symbols by appropriating fragments of different traditions and reinterpreting them to serve their own ends. In the game's world, the halo of the sun functions both as a ritual emblem and a psychological weapon. To outsiders, it is unsettling and alien. To initiates, it signals belonging and power. This duality reinforces the cult's methods. What is terrifying to the uninitiated becomes sacred to the believer. In this way, the halo of the sun is more than decoration. It is a constant reminder of the cult's ability to redefine meaning, to make the strange feel holy and the holy feel strange. Valtiel, the attendant of God. Among the most enigmatic figures tied to the order is Valtiel, introduced in Silent Hill 3. Unlike the grotesque creatures that stalk Heather in the other world, Valtiel is not purely hostile. Instead, he serves as an ever-present observer, a silent attendant whose purpose is tied directly to the cult's theology. His name itself suggests servitude, derived from the French word valet, combined with the suffix "el", often used in angelic names. Valtiel is the servant of God, the midwife to divinity. Throughout Silent Hill 3, he is seen dragging bodies, manipulating mechanisms, or simply watching Heather from the shadows. These appearances reinforce his role. He is there to ensure that the rebirth of the cult's deity proceeds as intended. Unlike the other monsters, he rarely attacks Heather directly. Instead, he monitors her progress, embodying the cult's constant surveillance. His presence reminds the player that Heather is never free from the Order's gaze, even in moments of apparent solitude. Valtiel's role carries echoes of real-world ritual attendants, figures whose duty is to guide initiates or ensure the smooth passage of ceremonies. But Silent Hill twists this into something darker. Rather than guiding the faithful toward enlightenment, Valtiel ensures that the vessel of God does not escape her fate. He is less a protector than a warden, a reminder that the cult's promise of paradise is inseparable from control and imprisonment. Metatron and the Seal. While Dahlia Gillespie spoke of the Mark of Samael, what Harry Mason was actually encountering in Silent Hill was the Seal of Metatron. Unlike the monsters that manifest from fear and trauma, the seal is a spiritual emblem, a force capable of countering the cult's god. Its precise function is deliberately ambiguous, but throughout the series it appears as a protective or banishing symbol, one that disrupts the Order's plans when completed. The choice of the name Metatron ties the cult's mythos to real mystical tradition. In Jewish apocryphal texts, Metatron is described as a heavenly being seated beside God's throne, sometimes called the Lesser YHWH, a figure so close to a divinity that some traditions considered his very existence dangerous to monotheism. By drawing on this name, Silent Hill layers its fiction with echoes of genuine esoteric belief. Yet in the game, the seal of Metatron is not used to exalt God, but to oppose the false divinity the cult seeks to bring forth. The cult fears this seal precisely because it is one of the few powers that can undo their work. In the first game, Dahlia twists its meaning, convincing Harry that the symbol is evil when in truth it is her undoing. This inversion underscores the cult's dependence on deception. Where real-world traditions cast Metatron as a guardian of divine law, Silent Hill recasts his seal as the hidden safeguard against a god of suffering. It is the one emblem the cult cannot control, and so they bury its meaning under layers of lies. Surveillance and control. Valtiel's presence in Silent Hill 3 is more than symbolic. He embodies the cult's philosophy of control. He does not strike Heather down or engage her in combat like other monsters. Instead, he lingers at the edges of her journey, turning valves, dragging corpses, and watching her movements with eerie patience. His silence is unsettling precisely because it suggests inevitability. No matter how far Heather runs, the cult servant is always close behind, ensuring their god's rebirth stays on course. This constant surveillance echoes the way real-world cults maintain dominance over their members. Followers are taught that they are always being watched by leaders, by the community, or by the divine itself. Fear of surveillance erodes individuality, making it harder to resist or escape. In Heather's case, Valtiel's watchfulness reinforces the sense that her fate has been preordained. She is not just fighting monsters born of trauma, but the crushing weight of a belief system that denies her autonomy. The design of Valtiel amplifies this theme. His stitched skin, faceless head, and ritualistic gestures tie him visually to executioners and attendants, figures who carry out orders without question. He is not a villain with motives of his own. He is the embodiment of obedience. In this way, Silent Hill makes him more terrifying than any beast of flesh and claws. Valtiel represents the Order's perfect servant, proof that within the cult, individuality is erased until nothing remains but submission to the will of their god. The buried faith of Silent Hill. The Order's power does not come from nowhere. It is rooted in the town's deeper past. In the first game, Harry learns from Nurse Lisa Garland that before Silent Hill became a resort town, it was home to a closed-off community that practiced secret rituals. Beneath the new buildings and tourist facades, remnants of this older faith remained: shrines, chapels, and sites of sacrifice. This history explains why Dahlia and her followers seem so deeply entrenched. They are not inventing a religion. They are inheriting one that predates Silent Hill's transformation into a place of commerce and leisure. This layered history mirrors real-world patterns where older belief systems are not erased, but buried, later resurfacing in distorted forms. In Silent Hill, the construction of the resort did not destroy the cult's presence. It merely pushed it underground, both literally and symbolically. By the time Harry enters the town, these traditions are already clawing back to the surface, pulling him into conflicts older than his own family's story. The Order's endurance comes from this rootedness, their claim that their rituals are not inventions but continuations of ancient practices, sects, and factions. Though outsiders often speak of the Order as a single unified cult, the games hint at internal divisions. Different leaders emphasize different doctrines, creating sects with their own rituals and priorities. In Silent Hill 3, Claudia Wolf represents one branch, deeply focused on birthing God through Heather's body, with a zeal that borders on obsession. In Silent Hill 4, The Room, remnants of another sect appear, centered on execution and punishment rituals carried out by followers of Valtiel. These differing practices suggest that the Order is not a monolith, but a fractured faith, bound by a shared goal, yet divided on how to achieve it. This pattern reflects the history of many real-world religious movements, where splinter groups form around contested interpretations of doctrine. What begins as a shared creed often fractures into sects, each claiming to embody the true faith. Silent Hill reflects this reality by presenting the Order as adaptable, its theology bending to the needs of each leader. Claudia speaks in the language of maternal sacrifice, Dahlia in the tone of prophecy and deception, while others lean into themes of punishment and blood. The existence of these factions also explains the variation in symbols and practices across the series. Players encounter the seal of Metatron, the halo of the sun, and other sigils, but their meanings shift depending on which leader or sect is using them. This fluidity makes the cult feel more authentic, echoing the way real belief systems evolve, fracture, and reform, each generation claiming to preserve what came before while reshaping it into something new. This theme of buried gods and resurgent rituals is central to Lovecraft's vision of horror. His stories describe ancient deities, sleeping beneath towns or oceans, whose worshippers perform strange rites to keep their memory alive. Silent Hill borrows from this tradition, portraying a town where sacred sites and forgotten altars still pulse with power. The result is a setting where human cruelty and supernatural force are inseparable, and where the Order's teachings feel like fragments of a much older truth. For the player, these echoes deepen the terror of the cult. The Order is frightening not only because of its cruelty, but because it seems connected to something vast and unknowable. Its symbols and rituals blur the line between local superstition and cosmic religion, just as Lovecraft suggested that mankind's fate might be dictated by forces beyond its control. Silent Hill suggests that the Order is tapping into currents of belief older than the town itself, currents that make their god's birth feel less like a choice and more like an inevitability. Samael, the Angel of Death recast. In Silent Hill 1, Dahlia tells Harry that the sigils appearing around town are the mark of Samael, invoking a name rooted in ancient mystical texts. In Jewish and Christian apocrypha, Samael is often described as an angel of death, sometimes associated with temptation in Eden, and even portrayed as a figure who opposes creation itself. By calling on this name, Dahlia taps into a lineage of dread that predates the game, framing her lies with the weight of religious tradition. But Silent Hill twists this meaning. The so-called Mark of Samael is no demonic seal at all. It is the seal of Metatron, a protective force. Dahlia's invocation of Samael is not theology but theater, a scare tactic meant to manipulate Harry. This duality mirrors how cults often appropriate figures from established traditions and redefine them. Samael, once a name for a divine executioner or adversary, becomes, in Silent Hill, a mask used to conceal truth, turning a guardian seal into the shadow of a demon. The brilliance of this reimagining lies in how it blurs the line between myth and invention. Players familiar with the name Samael might recognize its occult resonance, while those encountering it for the first time feel its alien weight. Either way, the Order gains power from borrowing the name, proof that they do not invent faith from nothing. They build it from fragments of belief, reshaped into something terrifying. Metatron reimagined. Where Samael is used by Dahlia as a mask for lies, Metatron represents a deeper strand of the cult's twisted theology. In real-world mystical tradition, Metatron is described as a heavenly being so exalted that some rabbinic texts feared his closeness to God threatened the idea of monotheism. Sometimes called the Lesser YHWH, Metatron was imagined as a scribe, a messenger, or even the angel who led Israel out of Egypt. His very name, meaning beyond the throne, ties him to divine authority. Silent Hill takes this lofty figure and reshapes him into a weapon against the cult's god. The seal of Metatron, far from being a mark of exaltation, acts in the series as a barrier, a banishment, or a protective counterforce. Its precise mechanics are left deliberately vague, but its presence always disrupts the Order's plans. In the first game, Dahlia hides this truth, rebranding the seal as the Mark of Samael. In doing so, she twists Metatron's protective aspect into a tool of fear, ensuring that Harry sees salvation as a threat. This reimagining underscores how Silent Hill thrives on inversion, where real mystical texts describe Metatron as one of the highest angels. The cult sees his seal as their greatest danger. What once symbolized divine proximity becomes, in the game's world, a symbol of opposition. For the Order, Metatron is not a figure of reverence but a force that unravels their lies. By recasting him in this way, Silent Hill fuses authentic, mystical resonance with fictional menace, making the cult's beliefs feel grounded yet profoundly corrupted. Flauros and demonic roots. The Flauros is one of the Order's most fascinating tools, both for its role in the series and its origin in real occult lore. In Silent Hill 1, Dahlia gives the pyramid-shaped device to Harry Mason, telling him it will help stop the spread of evil. In truth, the Flauros is a weapon of control. When Harry activates it, the object restrains Alessa's power, freezing her so Dahlia can tighten her grip on the ritual. What Harry believes to be a protective relic is in fact a cage, one that turns his good intentions into complicity with the cult's cruelty. The name comes directly from the Lesser Key of Solomon, a 17th century grimoire cataloging demons and the ways they can be summoned or commanded. In those texts, Flauros is a spirit who appears as a fiery man or a leopard, said to command other demons and reveal hidden truths. Silent Hill's developers borrow this name and reshape it, transforming a demon into a device. By doing so, they create an artifact that feels steeped in history, even as it serves a wholly fictional function. This blending of invention and tradition mirrors how cults often create legitimacy. By rooting their relics in recognizable names, they cloak their inventions in the authority of the past. The Flauros is not merely an object within the game's story, it is a symbol of the cult's philosophy. Power is never about healing or truth. It is about control, the binding of others, and the manipulation of tools that appear sacred but serve only domination. Prophecy as a weapon. One of the Order's most powerful tools of control is prophecy. In Silent Hill 1, Dahlia Gillespie convinces Harry Mason that his arrival in town was foretold, presenting his struggle not as random chance but as destiny. She cites practices like gyromancy, a form of divination where a person spins until collapsing, their fall interpreted as an omen. This method, long condemned in Christian tradition as idolatry, is absurd on its face, yet within the game it becomes a mechanism of control. By convincing Harry he is part of a divine plan, Dahlia strips him of free will. Every choice he makes seems preordained, every step part of a prophecy only she claims to understand. This mirrors the behavior of real-world cults, where leaders often declare that followers are chosen, special, or destined to fulfill a cosmic purpose. Once someone believes their suffering is part of a larger prophecy, resistance feels like betrayal, not just of the leader, but of fate itself. In Silent Hill, prophecy becomes a cage. Harry is bound not by chains, but by words, his actions guided by lies that present themselves as inevitabilities. The Order thrives on this pattern, turning superstition into law and convincing its victims that surrender is the only path to salvation. Exploitation of children and mothers. The most chilling aspect of the Order's control is their systematic exploitation of children and mothers. In Silent Hill 1, Dahlia sacrifices her own daughter Alessa, burning her alive in a ritual meant to summon God. The agony Alessa endures becomes the foundation for the nightmare world, her suffering transformed into a tool for the cult's ambition. The act is framed not as cruelty, but as sacred necessity, a horrifying example of how the order twists family bonds into instruments of faith. This pattern continues in Silent Hill 3, where Heather Mason, Alessa's reincarnation, becomes the new vessel for the cult's deity. Claudia Wolf insists that Heather's pregnancy with God is her destiny, reducing her existence to a womb for salvation. Heather's individuality, her humanity, is irrelevant to the order. What matters is her utility to their ritual. In their theology, the highest form of devotion is not prayer or service, but the sacrifice of self, body, and innocence. These themes echo disturbing realities from history, where cults and extremist groups have placed women and children at the center of their rituals. In such systems, motherhood is not honored but appropriated, twisted into a role of suffering and loss. Silent Hill amplifies this truth into horror. In the Order's world, children are not protected, they are consumed. Mothers are not celebrated, they are erased. Through this cycle of exploitation, the cult perpetuates itself, feeding its God with the very lives it claims to save. Lies and deception as control. The Order maintains its grip not only through ritual and violence, but through the careful use of lies. From the moment Harry Mason steps into Silent Hill, Dahlia Gillespie manipulates him with half-truths and false warnings. She convinces him that the seal of Metatron is the mark of Samael, presenting a protective force as a threat. By doing so, she turns Harry into an unwitting servant of her scheme, using fear and misinformation to guide his every step. This reliance on deception reflects how real-world cults operate. Leaders often distort sacred texts, reinterpret symbols, or invent visions to keep followers dependent on them for guidance. By controlling information, they control thought. In Silent Hill, the Order cloaks its rituals in Christian architecture, dresses its leaders in the guise of piety, and mislabels its symbols to maintain an illusion of authority. The truth is buried under layers of performance. The effect of these lies is devastating. Harry, believing he is fighting against evil, is manipulated into aiding it. Heather, convinced by Claudia's words that she has no choice, is nearly consumed by despair. Lies become chains, shaping perception until resistance feels impossible. In Silent Hill, the cult's greatest weapon is not fire or blade. It is the story they tell, one designed to blind their victims while leading them deeper into sacrifice. Psychology of belief and control. Silent Hill's cult is terrifying not only because of what it does, but because of how it thinks. The Order thrives on psychological manipulation, reshaping perception until submission feels like freedom. This is seen most clearly in how it uses prophecy and suffering to convince its members that their torment is meaningful. For Dahlia, Alessa's agony was not a tragedy, but a sacred offering. For Claudia, Heather's pregnancy was not an invasion, but a destiny. By redefining cruelty as purpose, the cult robs its victims of the ability to see themselves as victims at all. The psychological impact of this belief system is profound. Alessa's trauma becomes cyclical, replayed through her reincarnations, while Heather's very identity is undermined by the insistence that she is nothing more than a vessel. Even outsiders like Harry are ensnared, manipulated into fighting against their own interests because they accept Dahlia's framing of events. The cult never needs to rely solely on force when it can bend the mind first. This echoes patterns seen in real-world cult psychology, where leaders strip away individuality by redefining suffering as progress and obedience as enlightenment. The result is a form of thought reform where followers internalize the group's values until escape feels impossible. Silent Hill magnifies this process into horror, showing how belief itself can be weaponized. The monsters may stalk the streets, but the true cage is in the mind, built from lies, sustained by fear, and locked shut with the promise of paradise. The myth of the Mark of Samael. One of the longest standing misconceptions in the Silent Hill series is the so-called Mark of Samael. Throughout the first game, Dahlia Gillespie convinces Harry Mason that the strange sigils spreading across town are marks of a demon, proof that evil is taking root. Players themselves often repeated this explanation, cementing it as part of fan lore. But within the series, this claim is false. The symbol is not a demonic crest at all. It is the seal of Metatron, a protective force capable of disrupting the cult's ritual. This error is not a mistake by the developers, but a deliberate act of deception by Dahlia. By renaming the seal, she manipulates both Harry and the player into believing they are fighting a battle against a demon's influence when, in truth, they are helping her advance the birth of God. The false label has been so effective that even decades later, fans still debate its meaning, proof of how deeply Dahlia's lie has embedded itself into the series' mythology. The myth of the Mark of Samael illustrates the cult's most insidious trait, its ability to rewrite reality. By changing the meaning of a symbol, the Order turns protection into danger and salvation into threat. It is a reminder that in Silent Hill, the true battle is not only against monsters in the fog, but against the power of belief itself, shaped and corrupted by those who claim authority. Misunderstanding Valtiel. Valtiel is one of the most misinterpreted figures in the series. To many players encountering him in Silent Hill 3, he appears monstrous, dragging bodies, looming in the background, and moving with unsettling ritualistic gestures. His stitched flesh and faceless head suggest a nightmare creature like any other, leading some to believe he is simply another enemy stalking Heather. But his role is far more complex. Valtiel is not meant to kill her. He is there to ensure the cycle of God's rebirth continues. Within the cult's theology, Valtiel is a servant of their deity, an attendant whose duty is to oversee the transition between life and death, vessel and God. This explains why he is seen turning valves, actions symbolic of control, initiation, and the flow of divine will. When Heather dies, Valtiel is sometimes shown dragging her body away, not as an act of malice, but as part of his function to preserve the vessel until the ritual can succeed. In this way, he represents inevitability, the idea that no matter what choices Heather makes, the cult's god still looms over her fate. The misunderstanding of Valtiel highlights how Silent Hill thrives on ambiguity. The game never explicitly explains his purpose, leaving players to interpret his presence through fragments of lore and context. This mirrors the way real-world cult symbols and rituals are often opaque, their meanings guarded by leaders and left unclear to outsiders. By cloaking Valtiel in mystery, the series ensures that he remains terrifying even once his role is understood, not as a monster in pursuit, but as the embodiment of a faith that denies escape. Aglaophotis, more than just a potion. To a casual observer, Aglaophotis might seem like nothing more than a strange potion, a red liquid or herb that appears briefly in key moments. But within the series, it is one of the most important tools of resistance against the cult's designs. In Silent Hill 1, Dr. Michael Kaufman reveals he has a vial of Aglaophotis, using it to force the god embryo out of Alessa. In Silent Hill 3, Heather can ingest it to expel the growing god within her, directly thwarting Claudia's plan. Far from a simple potion, Aglaophotis is a counterbalance to the cult's entire theology. The name itself comes from ancient magical texts, where Aglaophotis was described as a plant with protective power against demons and evil spirits. By drawing from this tradition, Silent Hill grounds its fiction in real occult lore, giving the substance a resonance beyond the game's narrative. This makes Aglaophotis feel less like a convenient plot device and more like a fragment of forbidden knowledge unearthed and repurposed in the town's rituals. The cult's reaction to Aglaophotis reveals their fear of anything that undermines control. While they surround themselves with symbols and relics meant to bind and dominate, Aglaophotis represents liberation, a cleansing force that restores autonomy to those they would turn into vessels. To dismiss it as just a potion misses its true significance. It is not only an item of gameplay, it is a symbol of rebellion, proof that even in a world twisted by suffering and lies, there exists the possibility of escape. Faith built on suffering. The ethics of the order are rooted in a disturbing belief that salvation cannot exist without agony. In Silent Hill 1, this philosophy is embodied in the ritual that sacrifices Alessa, forcing her into a life of endless torment for the sake of birthing God. The cult's leaders present this not as cruelty, but as sacred duty, insisting that the child's pain is a bridge to paradise. To them, the measure of faith is how much one is willing to endure or inflict. This moral framework strips suffering of its human tragedy and repurposes it as a resource. The screams of a child, the despair of a mother, the blood of the innocent, all are fuel for the supposed dawn of a new world. The order teaches that pain has meaning only when it is offered up to their deity, and in doing so they turn ordinary grief into a ritual of control. It is a chilling inversion of ethics, where empathy is replaced by calculation, and cruelty is sanctified as virtue. Such a doctrine reflects how real-world cults and extremist sects often glorify sacrifice, demanding proof of devotion through suffering, humiliation, or even death. In Silent Hill, this belief system is magnified into horror, showing the consequences of a faith that venerates agony above compassion. The body as a vessel. To the order, a human body is not sacred in its individuality. It is sacred only in its usefulness. Children, women, and especially chosen vessels are stripped of identity, reduced to containers for divine purpose. In Silent Hill 3, Heather Mason embodies this doctrine. Claudia Wolfe insists that Heather's body must serve as the womb for their God, framing her existence as nothing more than a means to an end. Heather's voice, her choices, even her humanity are erased beneath the cult's demand for obedience to destiny. This view is not limited to Heather. In Silent Hill 1, Alessa is treated the same way, burned, broken, and sustained in torment not because of who she is, but because of what she might produce. The cult venerates the body only as a tool, its worth measured by how well it can be sacrificed, repurposed, or consumed. This belief reflects a distorted ethics, where individuality is sin and submission is salvation. Real-world cults often operate on similar principles, particularly those that focus on reproduction or spiritual vessels. Women are told their role is to bear children for the group, or initiates are told their bodies must channel divine energy. Silent Hill distills these practices into horror, showing how the order reveres the body as an altar, but never as a person. In their faith, flesh is not life. It is material, a resource to be harvested in service of their God. Sectarian splits within the cult. Though the order is often spoken of as a single unified religion, Silent Hill hints that it is fractured into competing sects. Dahlia Gillespie's branch in Silent Hill 1 emphasizes prophecy and deception, manipulating outsiders through false symbols like the Mark of Samael. In Silent Hill 3, Claudia Wolf leads a more fanatical sect focused entirely on birthing God through Heather Mason, a theology wrapped in maternal sacrifice and obsession with purity. Then, in Silent Hill 4, The Room, Walter Sullivan's executions tie into yet another splintered tradition, one that glorifies ritual killing as a path to divinity. These divisions matter because they highlight the cult's adaptability. Rather than one consistent dogma, the order is shown to reshape itself around whichever leader rises to prominence. Dahlia invokes prophecy, Claudia demands sacrifice, and Walter enacts punishment, all while claiming to represent the true faith. This echoes how real-world religious movements often fracture into sects, each insisting they alone preserve the original vision. The shifting doctrines of the order make it feel less like fiction and more like a living, evolving religion, bound by shared symbols but divided by interpretation. This fragmentation also helps explain the variations in symbols across the games. The seal of Metatron, the halo of the sun, and execution-based rituals all emerge from different corners of the faith, each emphasized by whichever leader wields power. To outsiders, the order may look unified, but inside it is riddled with rivalries. Silent Hill uses this to add realism, a cult that splinters like any real religion, yet remains bound by the shared goal of bringing forth its God. Paradise through domination. The Order's vision of paradise is not one of peace or freedom. It is a world remade in their God's image, secured through absolute control. In their theology, suffering and sacrifice are not temporary steps on the way to salvation. They are the very foundation of the new world. Every ritual, every symbol, and every lie is designed to bring humanity under the dominion of their deity. What they call paradise is, in truth, a future where individuality and choice no longer exist. This pursuit of control is seen across the series. In Silent Hill 3, Claudia Wolf insists that humanity's corruption can only be purged by birthing God, a being who will impose order through divine judgment. In Silent Hill 4, The Room, remnants of the cult practice rituals of execution, suggesting that punishment itself is holy. Even Dahlia's manipulation in the first game reflects this obsession. Harry is not guided but herded, his every step bent toward her vision of destiny. In each case, the cult equates domination with salvation, as if freedom itself is a sin that must be burned away. Such a vision parallels real-world movements where leaders promise utopia but deliver authoritarian control. By redefining paradise as obedience, the Order ensures that its members surrender willingly, believing subjugation to be transcendence. Silent Hill exposes the horror of this logic, a world where paradise is promised, but only if humanity accepts eternal chains. The Order thrives in shadows, hiding cruelty beneath the language of faith. They promise paradise but demand torment, twisting prophecy, symbols, and sacred bonds into tools of control. Their dark secrets remind us that Silent Hill is not only haunted by monsters, but by people who choose to sanctify suffering. In the end, the cult is terrifying not just because of what it worships, but because of how familiar its methods feel. Borrowing names from real mysticism, disguising abuse as devotion, and demanding obedience in exchange for salvation. These are not inventions of the fog. They are reflections of the ways belief can be bent, reshaped, and corrupted.